Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Sorry, I'm not very commanding. We're going to get started. Thanks so much to so many of you for filling this room. I was being all insecure that no one would turn up. And yeah, especially on a, I don't know if anyone's mentioned the heat to you, but on a hot day, all cramming in here, wicked. Very briefly, I'm Will Freeman. I do writing and some journalism. I write about and for games in the games industry, so that's who I am, but I'll just be asking the questions. So yeah, obviously we're here to consider kind of the craft, the present of art direction in games and where it's going. And fortunately, yeah, if you just have me, we wouldn't be getting very far, but I'm joined by 4 experts. Here they are. In fact, let's just break the ice by giving them a round of applause. Yeah, thank you. So who have we got on the far end? We've got Luke from State of Play. I'll let them introduce themselves because you're going to hear enough of me talking. Then we've got Gina from Oxalis Games. And then we've got Raquel. I hope I got that right. Yes, from Square Enix. And finally, right next to me, Gorgie from Jump Ship. Yeah. So I should have got you to do the applause now, shouldn't I, thinking about it? Yeah, let's applaud again. So yeah, without further ado, let's dive in. Oh, actually, no, I have got one more thing. You're welcome to ask questions. We'll leave a bit of time at the end, so get the old kind of grey matter whirring if you've got questions, and we'll try and keep about 15 minutes at the end to have a mic fly around. But let's get started properly. We'll start at this end. Yeah, if you could just a brief introduction to who you are, what you do, maybe some of the games or studios you've been involved with.
Yeah. Hi everyone, thank you for coming today. So I'm Georgi Semyonov, working at Jump Ship Studios on our first game. Previously spent a bunch of time at Unity as part of the cinematic demo team, quite a lot of time at Splash Damage and various other studios before that. At this point, working for probably close to 20 years in the game industry on every conceivable art job before getting to an art director. Took some time. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Great.
In short.
Hi, Raquel. I work for Square Enix, and my team looks after all the projects developed by external studios between Europe and US. So obviously, I'm on multiple projects, and I look after the art. Before Square, I've been for Square for 4.5 years. Before I worked for Rockstar on GTA 5, Max Payne, and Red Dead Redemption 2 for a little bit. Crytek UK, Splash Damage, where we nearly crossed paths, didn't we?
You were both art directors of Dirty Bomb at some point in history.
Right. This is the first time we met, actually, so it's awesome. That's it, basically.
Hi, I'm Gina from Oxalis Games. It's my studio. I'm a self-taught artist. I started out working for a bunch of small sort of indie studios in South Africa. Eventually ended up in the UK, in Brighton actually, at Relentless Software for a few years, and ended up sort of joining a startup in London called The Secret Police as the art director there. Left them and went and worked as the art lead at Mediatonic for a few years, and then thought I'd give it a go at doing my own thing, and started Oxalis was 2.5 years ago, but we registered the company 2 years ago next week, which is quite exciting. Yeah, now making Winfrost.
Hello, I'm Luke, and I'm co-founder of State of Play Games. I'm also the art director, and yeah, that's really my angle. I started off being artist making Flash games freelance, and then in 2008 set up State of Play to start making games properly. And they always have a kind of handmade bent. So I was always hand drawing the art. We hand built a model for one of our games called Lumino City. We have made like a pinball game which has inks splashed all over it, which is called Inks actually. And yeah, that is my angle, and I try and get as involved in the art direction and getting my hands on the art as possible.
Nice one, thanks guys. Really useful for setting the context, and I guess kind of continuing the thing of setting the context, and also Luke, as you'd mentioned that getting involved, it's just like if people are thinking of, I guess, perhaps taking their game art career to art direction, or wondering about the craft of art direction in general, like how varied is it? Is it as different as the individuals doing it? Luke, you said you like to get involved. Is that something everyone does, or other people taking a more managerial approach? I know
That's
some
a
of you
good
are
question.
also running studios as well as being art directors.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Luke, as you'd mentioned that, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, I mean,
Anyone
I think
chip in?
it's as different as every company. Do you know what I mean? I think every approach is going to be really different. And there's no right way or wrong way to do it. One thing it's going to affect it is how many people you're working with. We tend to keep it quite small, which allows the people, the artists working on it, to have quite a lot of say. So we valued that. We look for people who have their own ideas and bring to it. And early on in the process, we're bringing people together so that they can just bring as much of their ideas to it and hopefully own the project a little bit throughout the process. And yeah, so that's our angle, but it is also, yeah, there is a management role in that. Perhaps I have it easy because we tend to keep small. We haven't been much bigger than 8 people. Sometimes we're just 2 or 3. And yeah, so that's how we balance it. I try to involve them and keep a flat structure until the point where it really hits production. And that's when we tend to get big. It becomes more a management thing. We get lots of freelancers in, and that really is when my role turns from, wouldn't it be lovely if we could change this and that? And like, I'll get my hands all messy with this. It turns into, no, this is the look. We have to do this. And yeah, so yeah, that's when we speed up and it gets stressful.
Does that feel familiar or different to anyone? Like, is that balancing of, you know, the managerial and the creative, and how much you're getting yourself involved versus working with big teams? Yeah, just interested to hear anyone else's thoughts on their approach. Gina.
Yeah, I think again that is going to vary depending on where you are. For us at Oxalis, our art team is now, I think we're about 9 people on the art team. So it's like the size of your studio, you said. So that is very, very different. And having a lot of people means that there is people management that needs to be done. But for me, because I am not just art directing the project that we're on, I'm also running a studio. It means for me, I can't be dealing with the people side of things. So I have a wonderful art lead who is there holding the project together, essentially. And for me, my role really is providing the overarching kind of idea of what it is that we're making. And I hire artists who I think bring something very special to the project and give them the space to work within that framework, while our lead artist kind of holds it all together.
Right, so you have an art lead kind of balancing out your role as well.
Dealing with the people kind of side of things.
Dealing with
I just say make it pretty.
Yeah, guys, just interested in your thoughts. If you've nothing to add, no worries. But
well, I think I'm on the other side of the spectrum from you guys, because we work mainly on large productions with kind of big project. The teams we work with are probably at least 100 people, sometimes 200 or 300, depends on the project. So I see probably the other side. Also work for a publisher, where the dynamic is slightly different from when I was in dev. It's obviously more managerial, strategic. We do loads of research also on the game market. We decide what product might be better for a specific time, and obviously it needs to be in line with our company business plan as well. So there's still some art involved, luckily, otherwise, was fun. But I'm not hands-on anymore, and we don't have a proper dev team in London, but we work with all the studio, and I talk on a daily, probably multiple times a week, with the art directors from all the studios we work with between Europe and US in different locations. And that's great because we don't necessarily, I don't get my hands dirty, as we used to say. But it's really interesting seeing the dynamics of all the different teams, how each team approach our direction, and not only obviously, and how they, how they plan throughout all the game. From literally, we take them along from concept, maybe even before the concept, because there's initial pitch sometimes that can come from the developer, until released, post-release, and data, post-mortem, the full life cycle of a game. So, what about you, Goldie?
Yeah, I'm in a situation where kind of in between what Luke and Gina mentioned, where it's a relatively small studio and our team that's varying quite a lot. So in terms of the variety of the work, as Luke said, it completely changes depending on the phase of the project. It's much more creative work early on, and much more going through often phases of recruitment, trying to find people, trying to find the right people, changes between projects quite a lot, with the change in nature of projects as well. And again, I am in a position where there are certain teams would have people acting as leads if they're not leads, senior enough people, but we are really flexible, and I'm in a position where I am filling in as an art lead, as well as art director, and generally being quite engaged on the production side as well. And
sorry to interrupt. It seems like that's a really
this is
thing for an art
main
director,
thing,
right?
and yeah, I'm trying to keep make sure there's at least 50% of the time spent on art and creative work, but it's an aspirational thing.
Yeah.
It's often quite hard to get
I
there.
want to say exactly you.
Yeah, you're all allowed to do what Luke did. I mean, not interrupt, but like you don't have to
Yeah.
wait for me to ask a question. Because please just like dive in if you've got follow-up things to say. But like obviously, the title of this panel and what it's about is kind of where art direction is now and where it's going. But one more kind of general question before we get to that is, I guess one-person studios might be the exception here, but as long as you've got a few people, up to thousands, like there's some form of art direction going on, even if you don't have an art director. Like, how do you approach, I guess, that core thing? What fascinates me about it as someone from outside it is that idea of you've got people working on a singular creative vision, but I guess it's also you want their enthusiasm and autonomy and ideas and creativity. How do you approach that strange task of getting lots of individual creatives to work to one creative vision? Anyone's welcome to dive in. Go on, Luke.
I'm happy to dive in, just because it just made me think, oh God, that was stressful. And so let me share the pain. It's just a mass therapy session. It's fascinating. It's like you don't. I'm not sure it works if you're sort of in a high castle saying this is exactly what it should be from the outset, and then everyone has to toe the line. I don't think you end up with particularly happy people. But I mean, I like to work in a happy company, and I just don't really. I can't cope with people if they're sitting over there and they're frustrated. I just, I would like everyone to feel creatively fulfilled at the same time. You have to balance it with the needs of a game. So what we do is we kind of have we go through a period of experimentation early on. Sometimes it starts with just me or with an idea. And that tends to be just a couple of people working on that. Then we have this, Pixar call it the brain trust. So it's like most of the team, Pixar had like 20 people or something in it. I think they started as 5, which for us is often the whole company, come together. we push it in different ways. So we spend a lot of time saying, right, there's no wrong answers here. Tell us how bad it is. I'm going to be brave. I'm going to hear criticism. And so, yeah, when we just leave all our sort of ego at the door as far as possible with that. And that's what I was mentioning earlier about bringing them on early so that we can try different styles, different ideas, and that gives people the ownership then. There comes a point, and this is where the stress comes in, where you have to transition from one to the other. And I remember a point where it was with the latest game that we've just released, South of the Circle, or it's actually coming soon for consoles and PC. This is not supposed to be a promotion opportunity. I just found, sorry, I found myself doing it.
You're allowed.
I have a publisher now. They tell me to do this now. So yeah, you transition from one to the next, and you have to at one point say, I don't want to hear your ideas anymore because we have to get this done. So that's tricky. And so we had to wind up our brain trust idea and move on to production. So yeah, but hopefully by that point, everyone's in. It didn't cause massive stress in the team because everyone had contributed their own thing all the way through. And that's how, have I answered a question in any way? But
no idea. No, it's really...
That is how we give people the ownership and yeah, sort of two-stage thing.
I think for us, it's sort of, I think a lot of similarities, I guess. But because we've been building the studio as well as starting on, it's our first game. Starting on our first game, it's maybe been a little bit different. Where me and my co-founder, we sat down and we decided what it was that we wanted to make, and we sort of went like, this is the thing that we're making. This is why we want to make it. And we had an idea basically, and from there I kind of went and did all the research and try to find the I guess the visual language for what it is that we were making. But I don't see myself as the best artist on my team, and I don't believe that I need to be the best artist on my team. The people that I have hired or asked to come and join us are there very specifically because I believe they bring something very special to the project and to what we're making. So it's for most of the artists on the team, it's never been a simple conversation. It's never been this is someone who's applied to us and we've done an interview and given them the job. It's been a lot of talking to them, a lot of back and forth, and they bring something very special. So for me as an art director, it's like I said just now, I provide a framework. I have the idea to begin with, but how we execute that is almost more like a debate between the people that I've brought in to the studio. So what comes out at the end is very different to what I started with, but it's something that we've collectively done together. And I think giving people that ownership instead of them just being my hands, so to speak, is very important because people can look at the work that they've done. And I think when we release this game, everyone on the team is going to look at it and say, like I did that. That was my thing. That I contributed to that, and it belongs to them, and instead of just to me. So for me, that creativity is very important. Yeah.
Interesting. And yeah, it'd be great to hear the kind of perspective from slightly different. I imagine it's a slightly different craft as you scale up to larger teams, or perhaps not.
Well, you touch on the game language, which I think it's a really good point in our direction. I mean, sometimes everything starts from like a spark, an idea, and then you kind of distill this language and you give it to the team, like you said, because they making the game. Sometimes I see another director as a little bit of a, coordinator, if you're a facilitator. Sometimes you have to get, the best out of your team. And like you said, I relate a lot to what you said there. I'm definitely never been the best artist in the team. And even more now that we work with this amazing creative team around the world and they make these fantastic projects, speaking for what we do at Square, we facilitate, we support them, we give them what sometimes they might not have in-house. We provide things even not necessarily related to art, but user research that can give them even more tools to shape the creative side of the game. So I think that was a really valid point. So sometimes it might be even the opposite, because if we commission a team with a project and they have to work from an existing IP, I find that it's almost the other way around. It's almost in a way, scientific process where you start from something that already exists and then you evolve it, tweak it, make it more interesting. And sometimes there's some sort of, rationalization, if that is English, of the creative side of the art direction. So from something very creative, you need to inject a bit of structure sometimes. But at the end of the day, it's difficult to explain how that magic sauce, I think, somehow at some point takes shape and it works and it looks good, and you don't even know why you try to explain it, but it just works sometimes.
Do you set a time limit at your company? Say
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
We got one senior producer in the room who can say a lot about timing. Or Yuji. The he's.
So it's a period where they're like, just experiment, but do it by Thursday, kind of thing.
Well, it might not be by Thursday.
Yeah, exaggerated.
But yeah,
Monday,
we do have,
sooner than Thursday.
I mean, we do have 3 deadlines, and we got, milestones as a contract. There's all like a legal side of it, obviously. But we need to make it as develop friendly as possible. We need to work with, obviously, the budget, because, this is not a charity. This, like Square. But at the same time, we work with the team, trying to work on the strengths, the talent. And again, these guys have an amazing amount of talent in-house and research they can make on R&D and tech, and it's really rewarding. It's a constant evolution, especially in this industry where we just had UE5 and, everyone is getting ready for, the next release on, the next gen, which is already the current gen. And so everything is moving 100 miles an hour, 1,000 miles an hour, 1,000,000 miles an hour. And that's, I think it's a plus also.
It's quite hard for me not to repeat any of what.
Yeah, there's no pressure. Like if
but yeah, just to add, a lot of the work is facilitating this process of what is basically a version of collaborative storytelling that happens between team members, and manage this explosion of information that happens during the ideation phases, and help bring focus to all of that, and help the team and everything start converge at the right times. Again, there are periods of free exploration, as you mentioned, but quite often there is some focus, it is some goal to be reached, and some period in time in which we know we are free. It's not infinite, and there's always it is an iterative process, and just trying to push people through those phases, and encourage them. At each phase, things need to be complete, but each phase is also an opportunity to reassess things, to just continue this dialogue. So at the end, basically, what we end up is something way more than what everyone personally has inputted. And yeah, this is the role. Another is a facilitator of this communication and a support role. above all for me.
It's interesting, sorry, that it's something that occurred to me after going through the process of building a team up and whatever, and how we go through our education thinking of art, the word art as being an artist and one person and a vision and one thing. And you realize that, I mean, it just, not only is it it doesn't work in games, but actually artistic collaboration is amazing. It will produce something better than you have in your head often, I've found. Like we've just done work with actors, for example. I know it's not specifically linked to the actual visuals, but just by making it a far more collaborative process and letting everyone bring what they want to do, you end up with something better. Does anyone know of any companies where it's more like just one person's vision, but a huge number of people working for them? No.
Not really.
No.
I mean, there's always, there are like the leadership team, obviously, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, they are the only people shaping the project, creatively speaking. It's always a collaboration, like all of you said.
Sometimes projects start with a singular person's strong creative vision, and then there is a creative director that provides a lot. But all this, again, you mentioned it for you, it's a quite a different process when you're working with existing IP. For me, it is different, but only the starting point. Again, you can have a single page of script as a starting point. You can have a legacy of multiple titles before that. And what the difference comes from is this explosion of information that I talked about is it's just much easier to explode a smaller script, and there's more space to add and build upon. In the other situation, you need to explore something massively complex, but at the same time, there are many opportunities to play with all of its components and reassemble them in a unique way. So quite often, I wouldn't say starting from scratch. It often seems like, okay, this is what would allow us freedom to create creativity, but quite often it is a different type of creativity, but there's a lot of opportunity to be found in both cases.
This is something that's going to vary so much from studio to studio as well, though. Like, I know I've worked on projects which have been which have had IPs tied to them before, where there are a lot of sort of constraints from day one, because you know, this is something that's well established. It's been here for a very long time. We've got the audience, we've got the target, we've got, you know, the visual direction. All of that is already come from all these like legacy titles. And I think, you know, very often, depending on where you are, of course, and what the project is, there's going to be a lot of boundaries and constraints set just by that. But then you will see rare occasions, I guess, where IPs do allow art directors to do something a little bit crazy and something that seems maybe a little bit out of the usual. Like, I think Spider-Verse is probably a very good example of that. And what you get from that is then something that is exceptional. Whereas for us, we're creating something new. We don't have any of those constraints. The constraints that we have are ones that we're putting on the project ourselves and ones that we're developing now, I guess.
Do you guys find it difficult, I mean, just curious here, working on an existing IP, or, you know, you prefer just having your own project and have the freedom to go in any direction?
I can give a short answer first, and then we
Go
talk
on.
about it. Obviously, I would prefer to work on my own IP, and I believe this will be the default answer for most people. But having had the experience to both work on companies, on IP for studios that I work for, and working on existing things, either existing IPs or just very strong creative vision, including existing art direction, initial art direction. but this is an invaluable experience. So it is good to have been through both, basically.
I found working with IPs to be definitely a lot easier than what we're doing, because you have that framework. You know exactly what you're making. You know exactly when you're deviating from what you should be making. It's definitely much easier, and it's always exciting to work with big and well-established IPs, especially when it's things that you love or have loved before. Like, that's very exciting. But working on developing our own IP, like, that is terrifying. It comes with its own challenges, because I take all the things that I love and I go, I love this, I love this, I love this, I love this. It's fantastic to put all of that in there. But at some point, you also have to take a step back and go, okay, but these are the things that I love. Or, like, we're still making a game at the end of the day. It's still a product that we, it's still a product that needs to fit in with our business. We need to get players. It can't just be, my ultimate dream art fantasy, because that's just not going to sell necessarily. I can guarantee that's not going to sell. So I think it's a lot more creative, and I get a lot more satisfaction out of it. It's in a lot of ways the dream project for me, but it's by no means easy.
Something, actually, while you're speaking, Gina, something you touched on when we were talking before, and I guess, we're all a bit tired of the pandemic's not over, and two, we've all heard lots of lessons from the pandemic stuff, but at the same time, like, you've always done your studio's always been a remote, but we are moving into a world where there's a bit more remote and working from home. Like, is that changing art direction, or does it? And there's questions to everyone, but yeah, Gina, you've always been doing it, right? Do you see it? You chose to do remote, right?
Yeah, we did. When we set up Oxalis, it was just before the pandemic, and we thought being fully remote would be our angle, and it would be like really cool. It's obviously that changed, and now we're less cool for it. Maybe I don't know, but I've loved having the team fully remote. It is a different way of working, but then at the same time, I found that where I was before. There were many days when I would go into the office, and being an art lead meant that I would need to be, being on bigger projects as well, meant I needed to be a part of so many conversations and so many meetings that ultimately I was doing all the art direction for our projects via Slack from meeting rooms while my art team was sitting, in close proximity to each other. I very rarely actually saw them. So to me personally, it's the difference that it's made is that I think everyone has got more time to focus on the things that they want to be doing. If you're needed for a meeting, you don't always need to engage. Sometimes you just need to be listening. You can carry on doing what you want to do instead of just, sitting there being really bored because someone's got a question for you 5 minutes in the last 5 minutes of the meeting. And being fully remote, I think, has meant that as a startup, where I've worked with startups before, things tend to be very chaotic. We've had to be very organized from day one. We don't have, we're coming up to 20 people now. We have no producers, which blows my mind a little bit. We've often thought, do we need one? But we're more organized than I've seen in any studio before. And that is something that I think we've been forced to do by being remote.
And before I throw over to our lovely audience, all of you on the panel, whether to touch on that or just any other trends, kind of technological, creative, that are shifting or impacting what art direction is. I finally, as we get to almost the end of our time, thought I'd ask one related to the title. But no, yeah, any new trends or new trends that you see as shifting what art direction is? Or the answer
question.
No.
Well, I don't know. Like, I've often, like, technology-wise, not tried to use the latest thing, and I'm bizarrely, I seem to go backwards. So I'm always like, oh, what happens if we make it out of models? What happens if we screen print this? And I'm like, so rather than using the latest shaders, we're trying to inject something handmade into it as well. But the tools are always evolving, and so I say that, and then we're using we can use particle physics for our snow, and then you get something that looks like a screen print, but with beautiful screen print snow going through it. So we take advantage of selectively the wonderful work that's being done out there with shaders and different lighting effects. But I think someone like Square Enix probably is on the more cutting edge of that kind of thing, looking at all the latest lighting tools. Is that right?
Well, we were talking earlier about some of our team, obviously, as hopefully this is not secret information.
Keep it between us, everyone.
Around the world, some people are migrating to UE5, this is where the industry is going. So there's lots of research. It hasn't necessarily been affected by the pandemic and the way we work remotely, hybrid, in isolation, top of a mountain, etc. But this is a kind of a transition phase where, something has changed, for example, more on the recruiting side, I've noticed, because and there are the advantages and disadvantages, like in every situation, I guess, where lots of new positions have been open as fully remote. So, sometimes you have the luxury, if you think that's a luxury, working from your living room, and then, your salary being paid by a studio on the west coast of US, and you're like in Leamington Spa or wherever you are. So that opens up, I think, more possibility, and is both, in both ways, both from studios that have to work remotely or have to work to offer, hybrid, yeah. Thank you. Hybrid business model or fully remote. So even for anyone who's, looking for a new role, there's lots of things are moving at the minute. It will probably settle maybe at some point, but it's creating there's a turbulence in the force right now in recruiting. So lots of people are moving between studio. And that's okay, it's just like how it is. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but there's a bit of maybe turnover at this point in time. I think that's the biggest effect of the pandemic. It can vary between disciplines, but I don't think it's bad. Also, I get more time to spend with my cat. So that's the biggest advantage.
Yeah, to try to challenges first on the previous question. With remote work, yes, the barrier to people changing job, it become way lower, which people are moving around more, and this is from managing a stable team over time. This is definitely a challenge. It's more thought and time needs to be put into strategizing with your recruitment and just figuring out what people you need and when, and it's hard to know you have a very reliable team for longer. But at the same time, more people and possibilities for connections between people are available. It is normal now to have remote teams, which it is easy to hire people from anywhere. But at the same time, the communication and again, coming back to what Gina said, organization has become so much more important. Previously, a lot of direction feedback work would be quite effortless. A lot of work would be done just purely by having a walk around the office and just having casual chats with people behind their desks, and it won't feel like work. It won't be stressful at all, for most people at least. But now most of this requires either scheduled meetings every time we've kind of removed the aspect of body language. You don't know if it's an appropriate time to bother someone. You can't. People can't read you. You can't read people on Slack. So basically, just people getting interrupted by messages all the time. It's been something that we on our side we still don't have a good way to deal with. There are some ways, but nothing to really solve it. And yeah, just it's good to hear how you deal with constant interruption.
We've actually got 5 minutes left.
Oh,
I'm going to give this
yeah.
lot loads more time for questions. So, yeah, I better throw it over to our audience. None of them put their hands up.
Something to think about.
Please do. Does anybody have any questions for the panel? Chuck your hand up and the mic will appear. Brilliant. I normally have to describe the person with their hand up. A mic is about to appear with you.
Cheers. Thank you, guys. It's been great to hear your thoughts. I have a question for Gina. It resonated with me when you mentioned wanting to put all of your favourite things into an art style and then that having to kind of evolve into what's suitable for the game. How do you differentiate between things that you are willing to be flexible with in an art style and things that are important to not compromise on?
That's a very hard question. What I think for me, to begin with, is really finding, what is the foundation of what we're making? Like, who's it appealing to? Who is it for? What is the color palette that I'm using? What is the visual language in that way? All these different things, even though sometimes they might seem small, whether something has got, rounded edges or is squared off, like the little things, but they make up the visual language. And those little things are things we can define from the beginning and take to the rest of the team and see what everyone else does with it. I think in terms of the things that I'm not willing to compromise on, you always need to compromise on things. If something doesn't make sense, no matter how much I love it personally, if it's not good for the project, it doesn't make sense to do. At the same time, there are some things that I very definitely, do want to have in. But I think it's really just about being reasonable with what you're making and who you're making it for, and to remember that what you're making is not, it's not just for you. It's ultimately a product. We're not creating, this is not my soul on a piece of paper. It's still a product for players, and it has to be a success, because if it's not, then we failed. So it's just remembering those things, I think.
I think we can squeeze one more in. Brilliant. Sorry, sir. The person who's just got their hand up first. It's like a quiz show with buzzers. We might squeeze it in, but I saw the AV guy look at his watch. We won't squeeze it in.
Hello. I work on a mobile game that's now turning 5 years. It's a live game. I was wondering, is there something that we can do during the earlier stages of the game where we can design systems so that you can keep expanding, because you're always adding features throughout the life? How do you grow a consistent product over time that doesn't take too much overhead?
Who wants to cover that in 2 minutes?
There's a lot of planning involved, and that depends also on the concept of the game, I guess. And I think especially for live games, we know very well, don't we? It's production and a good producers, I can see you, are crucial, because it's really important having a very clear visual language concerning the art, but having a very well-structured, very well-organized pipeline production as well, because knowing what and how often you're gonna drop new asset or any kind of drop is crucial for the lifespan of the game. And this is just generally speaking. Obviously, it depends on what kind of game. Some games have weekly or bi-weekly or monthly, or it depends on the game you're working on. But I think having lots of clarity about what the product needs and what your audience needs and want, and then planning accordingly. I know it's very generic, and you probably made that conclusion yourself, but I think that's kind of the very most simple start. But guys, feel free to chip in anything.
Can't add anything better.
Brilliant.
That's
Well,
great.
do you know what? We've actually managed to finish. We've got a few seconds to go, so we've finished on time. So just to say thank you so much to everyone that came. Thank you to the people that asked questions. Sorry to the people that didn't get them. Thank you to the AV people for making it happen. And of course, thank you to our panelists. So an applause for everyone.